of the Talking Horses podcast, by the people, for the people, the new weekly podcast. Well, it's not so new anymore. That brings you reviews and previews of all the big racing weekends, as well as attempting to look behind the curtain of the sport with a view to increasing understanding, accessibility, and ultimately enjoyment of racing for all. Ben and Bruno here, as always, for amazingly episode 6 now. Time has flown by, Bruno.
Yeah, it's a thing. This is a part of my life. I can't shift it. I have to do it now.
It's stuck. We've so far managed to avoid a phenomenon known as pod fade.
Yeah, is that usually set in a bit earlier, or can we expect that to be hiding around any corner anytime soon?
I think maybe the latter. I think the moment we start to find it difficult to come up with content is the moment where we're going to have to face the reality of pod fade. But I don't see that happening anytime soon. There's loads of stuff to talk about.
There is. There's lots to discuss. Every week there's something cropping up in the racing world, which we need to get our teeth stuck into. So lots for us to talk about. Hence why our episodes are so full and bulging with information and insight.
Bulging to the point of bursting, but not quite bursting.
End of bulging.
Yeah. Lovely stuff. Well, this week we are going to be covering a few things, aren't we? We're going to have a look at last weekend's racing. We're getting very close to Cheltenham, which means that it's exciting, isn't it? 2 years we've waited for this.
I know. I've not really got my head around that. The fact that we weren't there last year, and it was all behind closed doors. And then the year before, when we were there, it felt a little bit like it was kind of tainted. Is that fair to say? In that we knew that something was it didn't feel quite right to be there. So this year, it's the gloves are off, the shackles are off.
We are going to be, to quote Bruce Millington, weak as kittens come Friday.
Absolutely. Look forward to it.
I can't wait. So we're going to have a look back at last weekend. We are going to delve into some deep ground, and I'm very much looking forward to this one. I know you've done a lot of research into that, so we will look forward to tackling that thorny issue, which is the case of Champ is Real. Do big gambles give racing a bad name? One that we've sort of touched on before, and a topic that comes up time and time again. So I think this particular example warrants some scrutiny. So we will certainly give it that. Then we're going to have the return of Antepost Angle, a segment that we have for the first couple of weeks. We're very keen, I think, with Talking Horses podcast, not to get too far into the realms of it becoming a betting and a tipping show. However, it would be remiss not to have a little look at things with the festival in mind, not least because the entries for the Handicaps at Cheltenham came out this week. So we'll have a little look at that. Also mindful that this weekend's preview will probably be a bit snappier. Mindful that the racing's just starting to ease up a little bit, or at least the quality racing, as we get closer to mid-March. And then 3 out as usual. So without any further ado, let's move on to the review of last weekend. So firstly, I suppose we should tackle our selections, because we probably have to.
We have to.
Okay. Yeah, Colixios didn't run his race.
Didn't run his race. It was infuriating watching that, not least because, you put your neck on the line. We've got, an ocean of viewers out there hanging on our every word, and presumably following us in on our tips. And he actually ran for 80% of the race. He looked the part. He was doing that thing where he jumped very fluidly, and he was gaining 2 or 3 lengths over his rivals sort of each time. And then Rachel was just sort of easing him back into second or third slot. Perfect. And it just looked like, he's been saved up for a big finish. Turning in, Rachel pulled him out a little bit, followed my advice from last week, just hold on to him till the right moment, and just found nothing. Or maybe, Teahupoo is just a serious beast. I'm starting to think that is the case in the case of that animal. So disappointing on that front, but we live to fight another day.
I thought Nick Luck had a lovely pronunciation of the winner. He called it, I'm trying to get this right, Chapo.
Okay.
I don't know whether that was just an attempt to sound different or whether it was just Nick Luck being Nick Luck and making everything sound silky smooth. But
he's probably right, isn't he? He's always right, isn't he, Nick? So
does sound better than T Hoopoo. Any horse
Yeah.
with poo on the end is it's going to have to probably outperform what a normal horse should to make up for that. So,
yeah, and he is doing so far. Yeah,
he
and
certainly
of course,
is.
you were remind me, what were you on?
Yeah, well, hopefully most people have forgotten. I was on Dashel Thrasher, and to be honest, with the benefit of hindsight, I think it was a stronger Ascot chase than the one that he won the year before. I think maybe, but that was a doubt, I suppose, albeit a small one, not enough to put me off backing him, and also just the fact that he had a pretty tough race at Lingfield, although that didn't seem to have the same impact on Two for Gold, who has pulled out 2 monster races in a row now.
Yeah.
So hard to know what to make of him, but I do get the sense that Kim Bailey is having a better time of things after a relatively slow start to the season compared to last. Things have picked back up for him. So
yeah.
No, it was disappointing. I think both our selections ran well below expectations, which is of some solace because it's almost better that than if they, get beaten by 2 lengths, get beaten fair and square, and you sort of think, oh, well, maybe we should have seen it. So I think you can certainly see those come back out in future and win plenty more races.
For sure. Too bad to be true in both cases, I think.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about stable form later on in 3 Out on that specific point. So, but yes, leaves me at minus £1.50 and you at minus £4 profit to £1 level stake. So, but it's fine.
Serious debt I'm building up there, isn't it?
That's fine.
The bailiffs are going to come knocking.
Well, I don't, and then these things turn around, don't they, very quickly? So, this week, I'm sure, will be the week. We learned something about related doubles last week. I asked you whether you'd had any more success trying to put a bet on Journey with Me or Sir Gerhard. Was it Sir Gerhard or Journey with Me? Sir Gerhard.
It was both kind of in consecutive weeks, that I wanted to do the same trick on. And it turns out, thanks to one of our, friend of the show and one of our first kind of most avid listeners, John Carr, that's not something you can actually do.
Hello, John, by the way.
Yeah, hi, John. Do send in your thoughts and further questions going forward, because it's really adding to our content. You can't do that apparently, because the bookmakers are kind of looking after themselves in that respect. I mean, I'm still struggling to see the total logic behind it, but they are bookmakers. They run their own business, so I guess they're within their rights to protect themselves as well.
Yeah, the explanation given was that they don't offer related doubles because if the horse was to win the first race, then their price for the subsequent race would shorten. So that is why they will. But my confusion came from the fact that I was sure I'd seen plenty of bets available of, back a horse for this and then and a future race for this price. But that's when a bookie basically will provide shorter odds than they would if you just tried to do a related double at the price that the horse was for those respective races. So
right.
So we've learned something there. So I just wanted for us to thank John and to explain to the listener why what we've discovered. So last weekend, so our 2 big takeaways. I wanted to try and sort of slim down a little bit. So we thought, let's just focus on 2 things. So Bruno, go your 2 big takeaways from last weekend's racing.
Yeah, sticking on Tiopu. I thought he was very good, very stylish. I thought that's kind of finish that could only be described as stylish. Seemed to do everything very comfortably. Obviously made a mockery of my weekend tip. He's now 6 from 7 in his career. He's only 5. He actually didn't go to Cheltenham last year. He would have, I guess, been in that very, very hot Triumph hurdle. They made the decision not to go. But yeah, only 5, likely more improvement to come. And we'll see truly where he is come Champion Hurdle Day, because it looks like that's where he is headed. And at the prices, I might have a little nibble of Tiopu to upset the apple cart that day. So he was very good, I thought. And then my second one is Goshen, not really from a future thinking point of view, but more the story behind it. He was a really resilient winner actually at Wincanton in the Kingwell, winning in a manner that we haven't really seen before from him. So he's usually just blazed the trail and blitzed the opposition in previous victories. But this time he beat a very, very good horse in Adagio, who looked to have him beaten. Timed his challenge really, really well coming into that home straight. But Goshen battled back after the last. And there was a cracking interview, which is the main kind of takeaway really afterwards, with Jamie Moore, the jockey. And you can just tell there is such a strong, sort of genuine bond between jockey and horse. And this is something I don't think we see enough of, is really understanding what Jamie's doing. Even before the race starts, he is talking to him to help keep him calm. He was kind of describing all these very sort of human interactions that he was having with the animal. Because he knows the kind of character Goshen is, and they've obviously been through a lot together. There was that heartbreaking Triumph Hurdle from 2019, which he was going to win by 10+ lengths probably, and he just got his feet stuck after making a bit of a meal of the last hurdle, and that was such a heartbreaking moment. I watched it back again and just immediately got transported back to Friday morning essentially of the festival. We're both feeling a bit sorry for ourselves, and seeing that, I now really understand the kind of the emotion that Jamie was going through, because I imagine that would have been his biggest, as a jockey, his biggest victory by some distance.
I can't think of another one that would have come close.
Yeah. So I just really liked that from a from a story point of view. So those are the two for me to take out. How about yourself?
Yeah, very good. Well, on the Goshen thing, I thought that was everything you said. That interview is fascinating. I'll have to dig that out and have a proper read of it. But I just thought that race was very interesting with the champion hurdle in mind. If I haven't already mentioned on the pod, I've certainly mentioned it to you on multiple occasions, and
been on the pod as well.
It's been on the pod, fine. So I backed Adagio a long time back, straight after his Greatwood second for each way for the champion hurdle. And I thought it was an excellent trial for that, an excellent warm-up race for that. I thought he was going to win. He travelled brilliantly. Tom Scudamore looked very confident. And for Goshen to battle back in the way he did, having looked between the last two flights like he was going to be beaten, I think we saw sort of the best version of Goshen. And so for a young horse, and we must remember that Adagio is still a really young horse, to show that level of form and as consistently as he does, but this time offer a decent layoff. I think he's certainly got a chance of finishing in the top three. And I still wonder whether Appreciate It will even turn up in the champion hurdle.
You have to, don't you?
He might do, but if he did, to win, having his first run of the season would be, even for Willie, that would be next level. So I thought that was interesting. I thought it was a very good run from Adagio too, at a time when also the Pipe Yard is not in particularly good form either. So, but as we've talked about, the best horses in the yard often run well, even when the yard is out of form, it would appear. So. But my two takeaways are both from Ascot. So I wanted to actually do a bit of time comparison, because I always like to do that, to try and get under the skin of what we've actually seen. And you hear that a lot, don't you, from people who know what they're talking about. They use the times along with the visuals to get a sense of whether the wool is slightly being pulled over the eyes based on the quality of the opposition that's been beaten, or whether in fact what we have seen can be believed. So the Reynoldstown, not the Reynoldstown, the what's it called? The Novice Chase at Ascot last weekend. The Reynoldstown's at Haydock.
It begins with R as well, doesn't it?
It does.
Rendlesham?
Oh no, maybe it is the Reynoldstown, and the Rendlesham's at Haydock. Irrelevant. The Does He Know Corach Rambler race. So I had a look at that versus the Ascot Chase from 3 furlongs out, just to get a sense of the finishing speeds. So 3 furlongs out is sort of on the turn, basically on the apex of the turn in. So they basically, Does He Know and Fakir Dudery ran identical times from 3 furlongs out. Now, given that the Ascot Chase is 3 furlongs shorter than the 3 mile novice chase, I thought that actually, and particularly given that Does He Know was up with the pace the whole way round, I thought that was perhaps a more impressive victory from Does He Know than. Well, the margin of victory suggests it was impressive, but the time perhaps supports that it was. Given that the Ascot Chase was a Grade 1. And they had one of the better chasers in Britain and Ireland winning in Fakir Dudery, so a pretty good yardstick. So I'd be interested in Does He Know. I mean, I thought Does He Know had a good chance at Cheltenham wherever he went. I was thinking of him firmly for the Ultimate. He's only gone up £5 for that win, which seems lenient to me.
Yeah.
So
given the margin of victory, this is where I get, it's a discussion for another day, but it's confusing to sort of see what you see there and then how that's translated into the handicap update on the Tuesday. So confusing one. But anyway, fine.
Definitely. So I thought that he would probably have screwed his handicap mark by winning in the manner that he did. Whether they're running this close to Cheltenham, they maybe even were thinking they might skip Cheltenham. But I wonder whether they might. I mean, Kim Bailey has good record in the Ultima, so I wonder whether they might still consider it for him, because I don't think off a mark of 152, considering how impressive he was there, that will be beyond his capabilities. However, there is another that I've really liked for the Ultima for some time in Corach Rambler. And he was, I think he ended up going off favourite. I think Does He Know was favourite and drifted out to 9-2, and Corach Rambler was well backed. Now, he unseated 5 out when he was just starting to make an impression. So he's a horse that's generally ridden, held up, and then sort of moves through. And, riding like that at Warwick in the Classic Chase in January, you're not very likely to win a race like the Classic Chase being ridden from the back, but he ran a very eye-catching 4th. So I think coming into this, a lot of people had seen that and thought, right, this is clearly a progressive young horse. He looked like he might have been coming there with a challenge. Now, who knows what would have happened? There's 5 fences out from the finish, but I just thought the fact that means he's going to remain on a mark of 140. And B, the fact that he didn't actually have anywhere near the race that Does He Know has had. If they faced each other again at Cheltenham, there'd be a £12 difference in the weights. So I thought that was really good news. It was he didn't fall. It was just an unseat, so the horse should be fine. So Corach, and I noticed that Corach Rambler has been absolutely slammed in the last few days for the Ultimate, but I think he's got a great chance. He's a course and distance winner as well. And I noticed, last point on that race, that this week Frodon has been given an entry in the Ultimate. Now, if Frodon was to run in it, he would run off a mark of 164, and by the way, would have an excellent chance. That would mean that Corach Rambler would be racing off 10 stone 2.
Right. Okay.
So that is very interesting. So just keep an eye out for that. If Frodon does get entered, then Corach Rambler would be. I mean, look, if you told Lucinda Russell that they'd get him into the Ultimate off 10 stone 2, I think she would have laughed at him.
Pretty happy with that. And without Frodon, he would be carrying?
Depends what the top weight would be. So I would imagine the top weight might be more like mid 150s, in which case he'd be carrying top end of 10 stone, something like that.
Yeah.
So still a competitive weight, but I mean, that is a big difference. So yeah, I just thought that was interesting. We'll come on to the handicaps at the festival later on. And then the other one was Mellon versus Blue Sari at Punchestown. Gowran, sorry, on Saturday. So Mellon versus Blue Sari, going from the overall race times. Mellon was 5 minutes 25 seconds. Blue Sari 5 minutes 33 seconds. But Blue Sari was carrying £9 more than Mellon. So Mellon, obviously, perhaps a touch below Grade 1 level these days, but a pretty decent yardstick still for the top end staying chases. I think that performance from Blue Sari, which was very impressive, sort of at the back end of the race, suggests that he has to be worth keeping an eye on wherever he goes. But also with the Kim Muir in mind, or possibly the plate at Cheltenham, but I think leaning more towards the Kim Muir. Grand Paradis in second. I think Blue Sari might be better over a shorter distance. I think Grand Paradis is probably a stayer. And if you look at the sort of his recent form, I think it's pretty strong when you come to start thinking about handicap. So that was another just point of comparison. I think the Blue Sari race might produce some very good performances both at Cheltenham and elsewhere for the remainder of the season. So those were my two takeaways.
I think that's so often overlooked, isn't it? The time comparison thing, where you can do it, but you need to understand that you can't compare, every time across different tracks, different days. But where you can do it, and where you've got good yardsticks like Bakidoudery and Mellon as where you kind of know where they are in the division that they're in, that can be such valuable insight. And it is something you have to go looking for. Presumably you've had the stopwatch out for that.
I had the stopwatch out for Ascot, to time it from 3 furlongs out.
Yeah.
But I confess for the other race, I just looked at the finishing times. But so there's a granularity there that I've probably not picked up on. But yes, I did have the stopwatch out for Ascot.
Good man. And that is something that Gavin Lynch does, isn't he? Obviously well-known tipster from the Up in the Ante show. He's very keen on that. But I don't see it as a widespread kind of tool that's used to rate where horses really are, or how good their performances were. So yeah, one for everybody listening to keep in mind if they want to go to the geekery of measuring this stuff. But it does, it's factual. It's not. It takes the kind of emotion out of it, which I think is certainly be my approach as much as possible.
I think it's one of my biggest frustrations when I listen to, I suppose, sort of so-called tipping podcasts or sort of racing review podcasts, and you get a very basic appraisal of a horse's performance, and it misses, sort of hard factual evidence to back up the opinion, and it doesn't take a lot to find that information. So it just maybe helps to put definitely helps to put a bit of meat on the bone. So those are our thoughts on last weekend's racing. Let's move on now to deep. I'm very interested to get into this with you, because I think you and I have maybe opinions, but we certainly have, based on the sort of preamble we've had this week, maybe sort of different perspectives on how we sort of tackle the question. So the case of Champ is real. Do big gambles give racing a bad name? So I'm going to pass this to you to set the context, Bruno, and explain the thinking behind this as something we wanted to tackle in Deep Ground this week.
Yes. So the story with Champ is real. This was a very lightly racehorse over obstacles. Had, prior to the weekend just gone, had run in a couple of novice hurdle events at huge odds, going off at 200 to 1 in one in his first race, I think, and then 300 to 1 in his second. Now, what we haven't talked about is his back form, and we'll come into that. But for the race on Saturday, was it, at Newcastle?
The Champ is Real race, the 20th of Feb at Musselburgh. So what was that?
Sorry, Musselburgh, of course.
Friday.
Yeah, at Musselburgh. It was a new trip for him. Sunday at Musselburgh. It was a new trip for him, over 3 miles. It was over fences for the first time. And he was initially priced up at 8 to 1. Now, there was a huge move in the market for him. So he went off pretty much even money favourite. I think 5 to 4 was his official starting price. So there was various, commentary on Twitter and places about the big gamble, which is kind of a term to refer to horses that see this plummet in their price, usually in a really short space of time, on the day of the race. Other examples, probably the most kind of high-profile example in the last year would be the case of Classical Dream at the Punchestown Festival last end of April, who'd been off the track for 18 months, and he was priced up for the race that morning at 33-1, and ended up going off at 5-1 because there was, for whatever reason, a lot of money came for him. So I think a few different questions emerge from this. Firstly, why do these plummets happen? I think that's a fairly, there could be a few valid explanations for that. So let's get into that first. Firstly, perhaps bookmakers are getting the price wrong. We talked about this last week, where you are just kind of up against another human in the bookmaker, albeit one whose job it is to set prices. They can get things wrong and they can miss parts of the form. And perhaps in the case of Champ is Real, there is some legitimate back form that suggests that he was the wrong price to begin with. Yeah. So we'll come back to that. So potentially they're overpriced, and punters who are wise to that will jump on that and realise that this is a horse that should run better than its odds. And that attracts money, and that therefore drops the price. So that's one explanation. There's also probably a more hard to define or hard to prove explanation where there's inside information at play, perhaps from one source within a yard or within an ownership for a horse. And that information gets leaked out very informally, perhaps. I think that is something that racing how it is, knowing how deregulated the sport is, and how much of a inner sanctum there kind of is within the sport, that's something that I expect goes on a fair amount. Now, when it comes to actually a horse winning a race, they've still got to go out and win the race. So yes, the yard or the trainer or an owner might know that the horse is absolutely right for the task at hand and has been, showing some really, really good progress at home. Great, they've still got to go and win the race, haven't they? So there's those two possibilities as to how these plummets happen. Now, the piece I guess I want to get into from our discussion, or for our discussion, is if information is being leaked from within, connections to that horse, is that just? Is that fair for a sport to kind of work in that way or operate in that way, where there is such a close-knit connection with the gambling side? So I'll, my view, I'm pretty uncomfortable with that kind of relationship. But I'll throw it over to you to get your point of view, because we've had a good bit back this week on this very point. So let me know where you're at on it, and if your mind has changed since we spoke, because mine's gone around around the houses on it as well.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so there's a few different angles to it, but the one I suppose I'll focus on first is Champ is Real in isolation. So I think what can happen around a topic like this is people can sort of get caught up in the betting element of it, and they can get caught up in the prices that the horse is for that race, the price that it was when it was priced up, the price that it's gone off at, the prices that it was in its previous runs. And certainly that is what's happened here, as you alluded to. So you mentioned back form, and so that was the first thing I did when you because you mentioned this to me. I hadn't even noticed it. You just pinged me a WhatsApp on Sunday and said, what about this? So I thought, interesting, let's have a little look and see whether you could create a strong case for the horse in a race of this nature. And it was pretty apparent to me, just looking through the horse's back form. I mean, firstly, it was a Class 5 novice handicap chase that it won on a Sunday at Musselburgh. So this is the sort of low grade, racing where you're certainly not looking for something that's got aspirations to run at the Cheltenham Festival or whatever it might be. And yet the company that this horse had been keeping, the important point here, I think, with Champ is Real is that he is a 6-year-old. So he came from the point-to-point fields. He had his first run in a bumper in March last year, and then he started hurdling this year. So he's a novice hurdler this year, but obviously went chasing in his last run. In order, as we know now from Talking Horses podcast, episode 5, to get a handicap mark, you need to have run 3 times, or you need to have won in one of those runs. As soon as you win, then you get a mark. What a lot of these horses have to do when they come from whatever background they come from, in order, particularly where it's a point-to-point background, so they don't have any French hurdling form, for example, so they need to start afresh to get a handicap mark. They need to run in novice hurdles. The problem with novice hurdles is you are racing against horses that are going to end up in listed races, graded races. You have to do that, and so that's why, you know, when we think about the maiden hurdles you see in Ireland and how sort of comical they appear, these 30 runners, and really there's only 1, maybe 2 that have a chance of getting anywhere near the front, and then you've got various things jumping diagonally out the back for the majority of the trip. You know, that is because they have to run there in order to get a handicap mark. So I think the critical thing with Champers Real is that he ran in a maiden hurdle at Southwell, and he came at 66th length last at 25 to 1, 2 miles, good ground. He ran again in a novice hurdle at Southwell 2 weeks later, 2.5 miles this time, came at 79 length 6th at 200 to 1. That was never going to likely be a race he was going to go off a short price for. And then he went to Plumpton at the beginning of January, back over 2 miles, and he was beaten, came 8th out of 9, beaten 55 lengths to Orchen Riesk, who is running this weekend at Kempton in a much better race. And he's got some serious form. That's a serious novice hurdler. He was 300 to 1 in that race. Well, he was going to be, wasn't he? So the fact that, you know, I don't think you can leverage the argument at the price they went off at before, in this specific case. Now, if you're talking about an older horse and manipulating of the handicap system, then that's different. But I think it's worth highlighting that this is a process that all young horses have to go through, and it, you know, means that when they then step back into the sort of company that they can compete in, they've got a much better chance. But you know, you're looking at back form and the Racing Post, and obviously you're thinking that he's got no chance. You know, pedigree suggests that he would be better over a trip. They've tried him over fences, they've tried him over a new trip, and they've tried him critically in a very low grade novice handicap chase. So I think from that perspective, you know, it's easy to see why the form and the prices he went off at previously could be seen, it could not be representative of his chance on the day.
Yeah, I think I've come around to that in that example where they've got the price wrong basically initially, because they've probably very quickly looked at last couple of runs, sort of prices he went off at, which all makes for a nice headline and you know, might stoke the fire that something more untoward is going on. But you're right, if you're particularly with novices, the pedigree angle is really important. I've got into that through, you know, you becoming such a you know, enthusiast of that side. It's actually, you see it and you kind of put it, you apply it to selections you make or races that you're looking at, and you see that it does work out and it makes sense. So in that specific example, you know, there's not an awful lot that's untoward in my view. I think we've kind of got to that. But what it did spark was this big gamble word, which you see quite regularly, don't you? I guess on a monthly basis there might be, you know, a headline in the Racing Post, big gamble landed at whatever, Clonmel or you know, generally in lower grade races. And it just gets, just with the sport, and I guess this is bringing it back to the big picture away from Champers Real, just with what we talk about the accessibility of the sport and potentially the reputation that it's got at the moment, there is an integrity question that comes up when these things happen. Now, probably less so, again, back to my earlier point around when a gamble is landed, the horse has still got to go out there and win the race. I guess when you've got, you know, lay markets available where you can bet against the horse winning, that's when things get really problematic and dicey, and I get a bit concerned about what goes on there. And then I start to think about my own position as, you know, somebody who holds a stake in a couple of racehorses, and start to think, is it actually right that as an owner I should be allowed to bet on that horse? Either way, does that, you know, I'm not suggesting in any way that any information from my experience has been anything more than anything but honest, really, and it really has. But if you were sort of trying to clean up the sport and establish a bit of a regulation around this topic, does it make sense that anybody connected with a participant in a horse race should actually be allowed to gamble on it? And I was looking at other sports for kind of comparisons, and it's hard to make a comparison because it's such a different sport and so many different factors at play. But there's definitely more of a hardline stance in professional football, for example, where nobody affiliated with the club at any level can bet for or against their club in a match, or for things to happen for a player of that club. And I just think it's also very hard to eradicate completely.
Yeah.
But I just think that kind of hardline approach is one I would back more broadly. But I appreciate that can also feel a bit unnecessary as well. But I'm just sort of thinking, big picture, this is where the sport's at. That integrity bit is so important for the kind of future prosperity of the sport, that I just want that to be right and to be clean as much as it can be.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's, that's such an important angle from which to approach anything. And that's what I think we're trying to do with this pod, isn't it? With every single thing that we come across, does it cast racing in the best light? Is it doing the best thing for its audience? Is it doing the best thing for all the stakeholders involved? I think in this specific case, you have to think about the impact it might have on punting. And, I know Tony Calvin made the point, he's someone who certainly doesn't pull his punches. He said this must put punters off. I don't think it necessarily does, but I can see the frustration that a punter could feel. Now I'm not somebody who's necessarily going to be punting in Class 5 novice handicap chases at Musselburgh on a Sunday. Perhaps the moment I start doing that is the moment I feel like I've probably got too much time on my hands. Not to judge anyone that does, of course, but I tend to narrow my focus to sort of higher levels of racing. But if I had backed something and then you sort of saw the price plummet on something else that you'd looked at and gone, I can't see anything there that makes this of interest to me, then I could see how that would be frustrating. And I could see in other cases where you might sort of think, I'm not privy to the information that other people are, they're getting an unfair advantage. And that's very fair. I think that it is probably important at this point to say that if you don't think you can, we talked last week about trying to find your own angles on punting, and let's just focus on punting for a minute. If you're going to have a punt on a race, find your own angle, create your own case, put your money down and take your chance. If other people have information that you don't, that is probably always going to be part of punting. Now, if they are on the inside and are getting something, that other people are not because they're affiliated with the horse, yes, that does present a grey area. But you nailed it. Like, the horse still has to go and win. You definitely shouldn't be allowed to lay your own horse. I don't know what the rules are, but as an owner, a trainer, anybody affiliated with the yard, I would very much assume that is prohibited. And then if anybody, I don't know whether you know this or I'll ask you, have you read anything about that?
Yes, no, it is. It's quite clearly stated, certainly in the BHA side of things. I guess you just don't. It's not an exact science, is it? Information can get passed on really casually, informally. You just might be just having a friendly chat. And where football differs, that kind of friendly chat is sanctionable if there are unusual betting patterns that come from that. Whereas that's not explicitly said in the BHA stuff. It certainly says everything you said about laying a horse. Betting on a horse to win is seemingly not prohibited, apart from jockeys, where they just can't do any of that stuff. Yeah. Betting on a horse to win isn't prohibited. So again, slight nuances.
You have to see it then from the other angle too, which is if you imagine that you were the owners, if I forget the name of them now, I'll try and look them up as we're talking about this because it'd be nice to give them a name check. So you imagine the owners of Freewheeling Dylan, who of course won the Irish National last year at, what did he win it at? 150 to 1?
Yes, 150, yeah.
Now, if you're applying the same sort of logic to what we've just been talking about, then that would mean that Freewheeling Dillon's owners couldn't have had a go on their horse at 150 to 1. Now, just because they were the only people that actually bothered to put a bet down, that's it's just a different scenario. Maybe you've got a yard there that generally doesn't have a punt on its own horses, because a yard obviously can have multiple employees, multiple other owners, all of which that have a sort of routes that could get that information out to them quite quickly in time to have a bet. Dermot McLaughlin, and the owner is Miss S. Mangan. I don't know if that's anything to do with Jane or whatever. Racing TV journalist Jane might well be. I don't know how popular a surname that is in Ireland, but anyway, I know there was a big thing in the Racing Post about the fact that they've been backing him all the way in at big prices, or not even all the way in. I think they just kept backing him when they realised that his price was still, they obviously knew they had a horse that had a chance, and nobody else thought he did. If you sanctioned everyone so that they couldn't bet on their own horses, you wouldn't get stories like that. So that's the other side of it. So that, I suppose that's why I'm of the opinion that you see a gamble in isolation like this and you think, that's not fair to the punter. But then you see plenty of other scenarios where, punters have done brilliantly, backing Conflated for the Irish Gold Cup. So I think it goes both ways. And so I think that's why it would be difficult. And actually, I think it would be to the detriment of the sport if you stopped people associated with the horse backing their own horses. But I certainly think that, perhaps perhaps it's this sort of stuff, maybe. It's this type of discussion, maybe, that it doesn't happen enough. And so when punters see something and they naturally go, what's going on here? When actually it's probably nothing more than, take Classical Dream, Willie Mullins saying to his owners, who might well be the sort of owners that have got some money, considering they've got, a multiple Grade 1 winning horse there. Yeah. They might go, all right, well, there might not be Tony Bloom putting £350,000 down on the Nergamine, but they'll put enough down to move the market. And it only takes one or two punters to do that. And, Willie's not saying this is guaranteed to win. I've drugged it and it's going to hose up. At least you bloody well hope he's not saying that. But, I think hopefully what we're doing here is shedding some light on actually what we think happens. Yeah, exactly. And I actually don't think it's particularly sinister. I know, but that's maybe the point at which we differ a little bit.
Yeah, but I think what's nice about what we've talked about in the last week is that, I've been a bit cynical when I've seen that headline and gone, oh, here we go again. This is another thing to, beat racing with. And we've talked about it. And in that particular example of Champ is Real, actually, there's, to me, I feel resolved about that. So you're right, having this discussion is a big part of it. I wanted to add one thing about the ownership part, indicated Champ is Real. Now, I've pulled this from Twitter, so I've taken this with a large pinch of salt, but somebody in the comments under the Tony Galvin tweet about this said that they talked to the owner at Musselburgh of Champ is Real, and they said to him that, they've been backing it in all weekend. And cited the reason that actually the prize money alone for winning that race would not be enough to cover the fees for the horse. So the training, entries, whatever. So suggesting that actually the money he's making through betting on the horse at 8 to 1, 7 to 1, then into 5 to 4, would actually go back into the upkeep of the horse. And that opens up a whole other discussion around prize money in the UK and the amount of racing. And I know that's something we're going to talk about at some point in weeks to come. So I just thought that was another interesting angle, rather than it being a sinister one. It's actually, I can see an opportunity to pay for my horse's, development essentially. So again, large pinch of salt, because it was taken off the Twitter sphere, which is never 100% reliable. But why would he make it up? Why would he? Yeah. But yeah, I think that's a realistic concern as well. So. An interesting topic for sure.
Definitely. Well, hopefully we've given it sufficient airtime and shed a bit of light on it for those that had maybe read a little bit about it and not thought any further. Those that indeed had thought about it as far or even more deeply than we have, in which case please do share your opinions through all the various channels, or for those people that hadn't even considered it. Hopefully it was an interesting listen and will encourage you to sort of, ask more questions in future, and because I think there's there's a lot of aspects within racing where you can do that and come up with a satisfactory answer.
Indeed.
Great stuff. So, right, we're going to have an anti-post angle in this episode, given that the review for this weekend's racing is likely to be relatively brief. So we wanted to just take an eye on the festival handicaps in general. The Cheltenham Festival handicaps, the entries came out this week. And so we are going to have a little look at a couple each that we like. But Bruins, you wanted to just highlight a sort of, well, in fact, you wanted to sort of jargon bust around the qualifications for the races you're looking at. So why don't we start with you? Yeah. Talk us through the races you're looking at, the horses you like, and any detail that you think people need to take into account when it comes to qualification.
Yes, I'll start with one on the opening day, which is the Boodles Juvenile Handicap Hurdle. It's at 4:50 on Tuesday of the festival. I guess the easiest way to look at this is you can view it as the kind of second tier of juvenile hurdlers, with the Triumph Hurdle that happens on the Friday with a much bigger prize pot, being the premier juvenile race at the festival. So juvenile meaning they're 3-year-olds at the start of the season, now turned 4. In this particular example of the Boodles, the Irish tend to dominate. I think they've won the last 4. And again, they hold a really, really strong hand. I think they've got the first 8 in the betting. So a couple I like here, just to move through very, very quickly. The Tide Turns has been one who's, I think, raced 3 times in the last 6 weeks. So you know a little bit more about him than some of the others who are, even more lightly raced than him. But he's been really solid, I think. I think he's run well on each of those 3 runs, including most recently behind our old friend Preivew at the weekend. So I thought he would be very interesting here. He's right up there in the betting. I think he's around 5-1, so sort of joint favourite at the moment. One at a price, and one that actually you signposted to me a couple of weeks back, is Bell X1, who is a horse that started life in Ireland and he's now with Paul Nicholls. He hasn't run yet for Paul Nicholls. Previously, he was with a chap called Ray Cody in Ireland, who I hadn't heard of, to be honest. Used to be a horse on the flat. He was rated 75 on the flat, which is nothing spectacular. It's okay. It's a decent rating, but he seems to have really come on since tackling his hurdles. One particularly taking piece of form from Bell X1 was when he beat C Sessions, a mare, an Irish mare. He gave her, a stone, more than a stone actually, back in October. And C Sessions since then has run really, really well, beating the likes of White Pepper, who's another good young mare, and running well behind Phil Dorr as well, who will be obviously prominent in the Triumph Hurdle betting. So I liked those 2. Bell X1 will be off a mark of about 130, which should see him carrying something like 11 stone, so sort of right in the middle of the range of weights there. So those are the 2 I liked in the Boodles on Tuesday.
Fab. I'll tell you what, I'll jump in and do, because I've got the Tuesday. We'll do it chronologically. So I was going to have a look at the Ultima. Now I like this race because it's one where it's the 3 mile. I'll get the exact distance for everyone. It's a 3 mile, 1 furlong handicap chase. So very much one for the staying chasers, and it is one that is generally taken home by a British trainer. I think 2005 was the last time an Irish trainer won this race. So I know it's one that Paul Keeley always tries to target, perhaps for that reason. We've just got a better handle on the form than we might do with some of the other handicaps. So I had spent quite a long time sort of right back even to sort of around Christmas time trying to sort of shortlist horses for this. I had Kilteely Briggs because Ultima is Max McNeil. It's those white and blue horizontal stripes with the mauve sleeves, the 3 under through 5 colours, for example. So Kilteely Briggs is owned by Max McNeil. I thought it was likely they might want to try and win their own race. Corach Rambler, course winner, and we've sort of talked about him already, and just so on and so forth. I had looked back and thought, who are the best British staying chasers that are likely to get to Cheltenham in March on a realistic mark for this, that aren't going to have their sights set higher or indeed their sights set lower. And I came down at the top of that list on 3 horses, Corach Rambler, Does He Know, and Ansam.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Ansam, I noticed, has not been entered for this. He is going for the 3-mile handicap chase at Kempton on Saturday, which we'll talk about in a moment. So that's very telling. I don't think you're going to run in a 3-mile handicap. It's one thing to run in the Adonis, which is the 2-mile juvenile hurdle on Saturday, and then go to Cheltenham. But to run in an attritional 3-mile handicap chase, less than 3 weeks before, 2.5 weeks before, it's not going to happen. So I noticed that Ansam came out. So we talked about Does He Know and Corach Rambler. I think they both still have a great chance. But I think the point I wanted to make here was that it's possible. And I was listening to a pod this week talking about the folly of trying to bet in handicaps a long way out. I thought that really missed the point. I thought as a general point, it's harder to do. Fine. I agree with that. But actually, I think if you look into the sorts of horses that tend to end up going for this race, the sorts of trainers that tend to want to have a runner in it, and the reasons for that, then actually you can get a bit of an angle. And look, Corach Rambler might do nothing for me, but I've backed him at 33 to 1 for this, and he's come steaming in his single figure price in some places now. He might not even run. He might not win, but I was able to get a price about a horse that I've always thought is going to go there. So it's not easy, but it's definitely doable. So Corach Rambler for the Ultima is the one that I would certainly not put anybody off at this point.
That's the one where Britain are expected to be 3-0 up after Constitution Hill and Everstone come in. The first 2 races on the Tuesday, and
then Honeysuckle starts the revival at 3:30. Right, back to you, Bruce, for your second handicap.
Wednesday 4:50 is the Grand Annual Handicap Chase, which is a 2-mile chase. Again, I would view this as the second tier, but underneath the Champion Chase and the Arkle, I suppose, for this division. You get a good mix of novices or second season chasers, or even some older types coming back down into this sort of company. I think generally, as a rule, a lot of the shrewd judges out there like to focus in on novices for the handicaps as a whole, because generally they're less, they're more unexposed, they're likely to carry less weight, and yet to understand their full potential. So intriguing race, this one. I think really open as well, looking at, kind of who's been entered. 2 that stick out to me, one at the top and one kind of in the middle of the betting. One at the top is Buddy Rich for Gordon Elliott, who has had a pretty good novice chasing campaign, I'd say, including a spin round Cheltenham already, which is, a telling factor in terms of what Gordon Elliott was thinking that far out. I think that was back at the October meeting, was it?
It was, yeah.
Yeah. So, and he was second to third time lucky that day, who was obviously gone on to be, a pretty decent contender for the Arkle. Yeah. So that's a nice, nice feather in the cap for Buddy Rich. And then at a price for the Tizzards, Amarillo Sky. I did this late last night, and I had a dream about Amarillo Sky thereafter, and I just thought, I've got a relationship with this horse now. Again,
is this the way?
It's probably not. What, to land on a collection?
Well, is this the way to Amarillo's?
Oh, nice. Yes, that's what they'll all be singing on the terraces, won't they? When he bolts up in there on the Wednesday night.
Every night I'll be hugging my gold-plated pillow.
Every night I'll be hugging Colin Tizzard.
Hopefully not.
Yeah. Good novice chasing campaign as well for him so far. The bit I liked was that he was second to Brave, how are we saying this? Shaska?
I think it's Shaska. Brave 60.
Yeah.
Shaska is Gaelic, I think.
Okay, like that. Second to Brave Shaska, giving him £3 earlier on in the season. Brave Shaska then obviously ran well behind Edwinstone and third time lucky at Warwick the other week. Now, Brave Shaska is pretty high up in the betting for this as well. So Amarillo Sky, I think he's pretty much favourite. Amarillo Sky would be now getting £11 from Brave Shaska, having given him 3 the last time they met. So I thought that was nice, and he actually won really well. He's in good form. He won really well at the weekend off near enough top weight, did Amarillo Sky. So I liked him.
Lovely sort of the way everything else had cried enough and he was still galloping on. I watched that back this morning. That was very good.
Yeah.
Just for the listeners' benefit, can you just tell us how the dream about Amarillo Sky went?
It wasn't very spectacular. It was like I was doing the tote basically, and the sort of, that kind of font they have when they print out your place pot. Yeah. Sorry, I was doing the place pot when they print out your place pot slip. That's what I saw in my dream. So no kind of, not a premonition as such as to whether it's going to win or not.
It's a premonition that you might put him in a place pot though.
Oh yeah, I'll definitely do that now. I have to. I'm bound by the rules of dreams. But then it's a great story when it comes off.
The inner workings of a punter's mind.
Yeah, pretty complicated.
Yeah, no, I love Brave Shaska for this. So on a form line through him, I would certainly like Amarillo Sky too. That's a great shout. Top man. So then the other for me is, so I have a remarkable record in the plate on the Thursday, the 2.5 mile handicap chase. I have no idea why, but I've backed what was he called? The name was in my head a second ago. Nick Mitchell trained Siri Jalak. I backed Siri Jalak. I backed Simply the Bets in perhaps my greatest ever festival gamble. And last year I had the shunter. So, I mean, this is probably the year where it starts to fall off a cliff, but that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is I know what I'm doing. So I like this race because you generally get horses that have run well at Cheltenham that season tend to come to the fore. It's a real shame that the 2.5 mile novice handicap chase has been removed from the festival, because that was always a good race. But what it does mean is that those horses have to potentially look at stepping up to something like this. So 2 years ago, Trials Day, there was a handicap novices chase, 2.5 miles, and then an open one, and that was Torn and Frayed won the open one as a novice, and Imperial Alcazar won the novice version. So I think what you've got there is progressive horses. I wouldn't necessarily go back and look at the Paddy Power in November, or the what is it, the Bet365 Caspian Caviar, whatever they call it, the one in December. I think what happens is a lot of these races, there seems to be one at every meeting at Cheltenham during the season. And so you get a lot of horses like Spirit of the Games is prime example, runs every time. People get suckered into backing him each way every time. He's not going to win this race. Do not back him because it is folly. Find something that's actually got a chance of winning. You want a progressive novice. And for me, Imperial Alcazar, I think he's come into, he was double figure price. He's now 8-1. He's top of the betting pretty much. Celebra Delaine is 6-1 favourite. But we talked about it in an earlier episode, in the Trials Day review episode. So go back and have a listen to that if you want to know why I like Imperial Alcazar. But this was another race where I thought, I actually haven't backed him yet, but I've been hovering over him for a few days, and barring something unforeseen, that's where my money will be going for the plate, for the fact that it's a race that I think you can look back at form on this side of the Irish Sea and have a decent feel for what's going to run well. Now, that doesn't mean you should overlook Ireland, and obviously last year you had the shunter, but the shunter had run at Cheltenham before, albeit in the Greatwood in November. And the shunter was sort of one of these horses that slightly breaks the mold, in that he'd been doing everything, having this incredible season, and it was a bit like you just got to back him wherever he goes, because he just looks like he's going to win whatever he races in. So the Imperial Alcazar in the plate is definitely interesting for me.
Yeah, nice. I like that as well. Definitely.
Right. Cool. Well, hopefully there's some. Well, we'll look back on this one, won't we? Episode 6, we're going to look back on in a month's time and see whether we were able to pick anything nice at this early stage for a festival handicap. On to this weekend. I only got one race. So shall I go first, or would you like to go first?
I can very quickly mention one race from Ireland, just to provide the balance that's needed across our British Isles here. And that is at Naas on Sunday. at 2:30. There's a 2 mile chase. It's a grade 3. I think it's called the Bet Victor Chase. And this could again provide pointers for the festival in terms of the handicaps, particularly in terms of the Grand Annual, which we just spoke about, because you've got the likes of the aforementioned Buddy Rich and also Andy Dufresne, who was such a talked up horse, wasn't he? Was it even, maybe it was sort of this time 2 years ago, he was kind of the second coming or whatever, and he's gone a different path. But he runs in this as well as some more experienced types as well. So we'll get a good idea as to where those guys sit in the pecking order. But one I like in this is Blackbow, who ran pretty well. I think we mentioned him before. He ran pretty well at the Dublin Racing Festival over a trip that was just probably too far for him, over 2.5 miles. So he's coming back to 2 miles. He was also running off near enough top weight at the Dublin Racing Festival and just run out of puff coming up that deceptive Leopardstown finish. So that was one just to highlight to our listeners with a view to, potential selection on Sunday, but also going forward for Cheltenham.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I noticed that Willie doesn't have a great record of even sending horses for handicaps at Cheltenham, does he? Never mind having the winners in handicaps at Cheltenham. So, Blackbow sort of sits somewhere between handicap chases and graded chases, doesn't he, at this stage?
He's not, just to clarify, he's not actually entered for anything at Cheltenham at this stage. I guess he could always be supplemented, but for this race on Sunday, I think that's almost why would be one to be with, because he's targeted this and then may look at things at Fairyhouse and Punchestown later in the spring.
And we will talk about the stable form of Willie Mullins in a minute. Absolutely unreal. Yeah. Right, and so my selection, the race I was going to talk about is also the race for my selection. So should we move on to our weekend selections then?
Let's do it, man.
I will just point out to the listeners that we just had a very interesting. We had a little technical hitch. So we had a brief interlude, and literally as we were fixing the hitch, we got the news that JP McManus has just bought Enjoy Delaine, who I sort of tentatively put up for the Grand National in last week's episode. So
it's not tentative anymore, is it?
It's not tentative anymore, and I've now backed him. So I took advantage of the hiatus and very much got on at 18-1 because they brought him with the national in mind. So that's exciting news, isn't it?
Very much so. Yeah, that could be a profitable hitch for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll buy you a new pair of headphones to make up for the
Yes, please. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Smashing. So so the race that I wanted to focus in on with this weekend in mind is the 3 mile Coral Trophy Handicap Chase at Kempton, the 3:37 on Saturday. It used to be the Racing Post Trophy, I think. But this doesn't look a particularly strong renewal. We've talked about sort of UK staying handicap chases. And a lot of these horses run against each other. A lot can beat each other on a given day. So you're looking for one that, either at a nice price that you think is likely to run its race and has a chance of coming in, or you're looking for one that you think is highly progressive. Now, often the market picks up on those highly progressive ones, and that's what's happened here. But I absolutely love Ansam as a horse. I put him in my tracker after he won at Ascot in December, and swore that I would just follow him wherever he goes this year. I thought the Ultima was going to be the plan. I thought maybe they'd go Sky Bet Chase and then Ultima. They missed the Sky Bet Chase for whatever reason. I don't know if it was the question marks over the ground. But anyway, my case for my weekend selection, which is Ansam, is if you go back and look at his victory in December, he beat Phoenix Way, who has since beaten Fagnon d'Estravael at Ascot last month. And Fagnon d'Estravael came a close third in the Grade 1 Ascot chase last weekend. So that form now looks very good. Phoenix Way actually reopposes in this race, but I would certainly have Ansam over him. Check It Out was a 22 length fifth in that same December race that Ansam won, and has since won under top weight in a Class 3 staying handicap at Fontwell. Balamide Picton was sixth. He's since come a close second in a Class 2 veterans handicap chase at Exeter. Regal Encore, core specialist, came a 5-length fourth behind Fortescue last weekend. Storm Control was pulled up, and he then should have won the Sky Bet Chase at Doncaster, but his young and inexperienced jockey went for home too soon. And of course, Caribbean Boy fell at the first, so didn't play a part in the race, but he since came out and won at Kempton. So that form looks really strong. Ansam also finished 10 lengths clear of Glory and Fortune over hurdles at Newbury in November, albeit getting £17. But that was always sort of, preparation for what he would do over fences. So that form doesn't look too bad now either. He jumped well at Ascot. He showed a great attitude to shee off the attentions of Phoenix Way that day. And also from the turn in, he just strung everything out behind him. So he made most of the running and then absolutely left the majority for dead. It was only Phoenix Way that could stay with him. And Phoenix Way actually sort of came up sides at one point and Ansam just kept finding. A rise of £6 seems very fair. As I said, he's not entered for the Ultima, so they've obviously decided this is the race that they've got the best chance of winning. And I think even though the stable form is not particularly good at the moment, Evan Williams' form with staying chases this season has been fantastic. So for all of those reasons, I think Ansam is likely to run a very big race. I think he's 5-1 currently. The great thing about putting a selection up in a handicap like this is you're unlikely to get anything going off at sort of 2-1, 6-4 or whatever. So hopefully we'll still get a nice price about Ansam. And I'd be disappointed, if he gets chinned by something, then so be it. But I'd be disappointed if jumping the last win, we're not sitting on a live one. So that's my selection for this weekend.
Very compelling. What was the formtastic race again?
It was the I'll give you the name. It was 18th of December at Ascot. It was the Howden Silver Cup handicap chase.
Yeah. When you see those rarely you see those kind of things working out so well. But when you do, want to definitely keep in mind for all the others that you mentioned as well in there. Yeah, nice. Indeed. Shall I move on to mine?
Please do.
Right. I'm really in need of a solid one. Okay, so that's why my tip this week is Knight Salute in the Adonis hurdle at Kempton in the Grade 2. He is undefeated over hurdles thus far. He's beaten Impulsive One twice, who he reopposes here for. That's Impulsive One for Nicky Henderson. He beat Porticello, who is currently the shortest in the Triumph hurdle betting from a UK's juvenile point of view. Porticello has since won twice really, really well. So that form is working out very, very well indeed. He's trained by the lesser-known Milton Harris. There's a nice story there as well. But I feel like Knight Salute is going to be pretty solid on his way through to hopefully putting it up to the likes of Pied Piper, etc. In a few weeks' time. And he's also won at the track already early in the season. So I think that stacks up pretty well. There is one to watch here as well, though, just with the future in mind, and that is Pleasant Man, who is on debut for Paul Nicholls. Pretty highly rated on the flat. He rated 95 on the flat, which meant he was competing for some serious prize money. And do you know, quiz question for you, Ben?
Go for it.
Who did Pleasant Man beat on debut on the flat?
Could you give me a clue? Give me the race.
I'm not even going to give you a clue. I'm just going to give you the answer. How about that? And it's Pied Piper.
Well,
which is quite taking, given he's joint favourite for the Triumph hurdle. So he's definitely one to watch. First time over hurdles, so you never know how that's going to go, which is why Knight Salute for me is the solid option. But Pleasant Man could be one to watch going forward. And Paul Nicholls does have a bit of history in getting one right for this race that you've not seen before, and then suddenly they go off, pretty short for the Triumph, 3 weeks later. So who knows? Pleasant Man might be that one, but it's Knight Salute for me this weekend in the Adonis.
Yeah, 95 rated flat horse is Pleasant Man. So
yeah,
very interesting. Yeah, we were just talking before we started about the ground. I live about 2 miles from Kempton, and we had quite a bit of rain overnight. Certainly when I woke up this morning and took the dog out, I came back a lot wetter than when I left. So the ground is good to soft currently, but I think the forecast for the next 2 days looks to be fairly mild and sunny. So I expect that we probably will get good to soft. And I think Knight Salute's a horse that probably wants sort of goodish ground.
Decent ground, yeah.
So sure. I'd have thought that with a bit of drying out over the next 2 days, as long as it doesn't get too tacky, he should be fine on it. So yeah, I think that's a great shout. I know I suggested that we might think about doing a double last weekend, which flopped. But I think you could do many worse doubles than Knight Salute and Sam this weekend.
Let's try that one again.
Nice, good. Well, I feel like we're in confident form going into
Always
into this weekend. So
yeah.
Smashing. Right, so on to 3 to finish up episode 6. So with I'm going to literally make this up on the fly because I have not had a chance to give this any real detailed thought, but I did list here every single Willie Mullins horse in a graded race that had any sort of a chance. Willie Mullins is on fire at the moment, operating at a strike rate, we alluded to this earlier, of more than 40%. We both liked to Queen's Brook in the Quevega Mares Hurdle at Punchestown on Wednesday, and Burning Victory put her in her place, although it might be reversed at Cheltenham. But that stable form is just everything he touches is turning to gold. It feels inevitable that he'll bag plenty of winners at the festival. We're going to do our Willie Mullins 5-timer, and obviously, Bruce, you can go first. You got 2 minutes. Go.
Well, no, we're gonna go in turn, aren't we? Or do you need the time?
I need the time.
Okay, all right. Team captain for me is Allaho. Don't just copy mine either. We need a bit of differentiation. Allaho captains the team for sure in the Ryanair. Facile Vega's gonna bang in some goals as well for sure. He's solid as rock. I'm keep thinking about that Quevega hurdle. Galopin de Champ would be my third pick in the 5-timer for the Turners. We'll return to that debate another time. Followed by Sir Gerhard actually in the Supreme, and my 5th in the 5-timer is Brandy Love in the Mares Novices Hurdle, and that at the moment prices up at over 100 to 1. So it's free money, isn't it?
It's not bad. Oh, well, I mean, you have to know where Sir Gerhard is going to go.
He'll go to the Supreme, don't you worry.
I tell you what, if he does, I'll be very happy because I'm on Dysart Dynamo for the Ballymore from a while back, so that would suit me beautifully. Okay, fine. Well, I'll tell you what we'll do then. It has to be Allaho as the team captain. I will copy you on that one. I'm going to have Galopin de Champ, whichever race he goes for, as my second choice. I love Bob Ollinger. I know I've said he's the best horse for training, so that is slightly contradictory, but I just
it's all right. You can change your mind. It's fine.
It's difficult. Actually, I really don't know on that one. But Galopin de Champ is so good that is enough to put him in second place. I'm gonna then have Dysart Dynamo for the Ballymore. Then I'm going to have Facile Vega, and then I'm going to have, because the Mares Novice Hurdle is competitive with Allegory de Vassy and Brandy Love, I'm going to go for Vauban as my 5th.
Yes, I hovered over that one for sure.
Remind me what I chose.
Hello, Galopin de Champ, Facile Vega, Vauban, and do you need a 5th?
What did I say? Dysart Dynamo.
Dysart Dynamo. There you go. There you go, folks.
You see, it just proves you can make stuff up quickly.
And the reason for that is that that question is that, sometimes it's just more obvious than you think. Try and be clever. Try and back, a yard that's maybe out of form, or just turning a corner with the second or third fab. Sometimes Willie's just got it right. And he certainly has at the moment, hasn't he? And on the subject of trainer form, should we have a quick look?
Please.
This was inspired by a friend of the show, James Aston. Shout out to him. We have regular calls with James about the festival, and he wants to know in the run-up to Cheltenham which trainers are in form and which trainers are struggling. Now, you've got the list there, and you want to just reel off a couple. Obviously, we know about Willie in the mid-40s over the last 2 weeks. Any others that spring up for you?
So I'm going to start with, let's start with the top then. So yeah, those that perhaps really jump out. Sam Thomas is back up at 50%, 3 wins from the last 6. So he'd had an amazing start to the season and dropped away a little bit. So he's very much come back. Good risk at all, winning for him nicely at Ascot last weekend. He's now favourite for the Coral Cup, which I think is insane. But that just shows you what Antepost betting looks like these days. Henry Daly is at 44.4%, 4 wins from his last 9. He's having a blinding season. I can't believe I let Fortescue go last weekend. I know I mentioned him on the pod. I didn't back him, and I could have had him at 14 to 1. He was a lovely winner at Ascot. And obviously Hillcrest was super impressive. It is now favourite for the Albert Bartlett. Mullins is at 44%, 11 wins from the last 25. You got Emma Lavelle at 40%, Donald McCain just under 40%, Kim Bailey we talked about, he's just under 30%, and then former Manchester United footballer, I think Mickey Hammond is at 27%. So good for him.
Yeah, and we should add, I suppose, for the less well informed on these percentages, is that if you're operating at 25 and above, you're in good nick, aren't you?
Yeah, I think you're in very good nick.
Yeah.
Very good nick. I think if you're anywhere between 15 and 25, you generally, over the course of a season, so there's something in that bracket, you'd be having a really good season. I think Milton Harris is 21% for the whole season, and that's deemed to be good. So if you're at 25 and above, you're on fire.
Any struggling that we should be aware of? There's been a lot of talk about Paul Nicholls, Henry de Bromhead. Perhaps they're both turning a corner.
I don't think so. I mean, it sort of looks as though they are on the figures. And this is maybe a subtle nuance that you look at the figures and maybe they are starting to come back. But then you look at the performances of some of their horses and think they're still running like there's something wrong. Calixios last weekend, for example. So Henry was up to about 19% going into last weekend. But Calixios just ran like there's something wrong. But Henry's back up to 21% now, having been a lot lower than that. Interesting, Colin Tizard is at 21%, and that's sort of on the lower end, but his horses seem to be running better after a quiet spell. But if they're deemed to be a little bit below par, then that's good news for Fiddler on the Roof, who I think is a live outsider for the Gold Cup, given how well he ran in at Ascot or top weight last weekend. If he is a little bit below par, then, he's been progressive all season, so there could be quite a big jump between Ascot and Cheltenham. Philip Hobbs at 21%, Alan King at 20%, Paul Nicholls 19%. So again, you look at the way some of his horses are running, I don't think that they are back to the sort of levels that, Paul's often been, when he's hot, he's high 20s into the 30s. Gordon Elliott at 12.5%. Now that's interesting because generally, I've noticed this with Gordon, he quietens down in the build-up to Cheltenham. So I wouldn't, and that includes Dublin Racing Festival, so I wouldn't be too worried about that. And actually, he had a decent DRF, didn't he? And then Nicky Henderson at 9.38%. That's the lowest he's been for a long time. He's been up in the 20s for the last few weeks when I've been looking. But again, he's one who's probably got bigger things in mind.
He's winding up, isn't he? Yeah, that one stuck out to me. But then I couldn't really think of performances that sort of franked that figure, if you see what I mean. Like you were mentioning, those kind of big names that haven't run to what they should. So good. We'll keep tracking that, won't we, in the week to come on request of our friend James.
We'll add that in as a separate segment, maybe.
Why not? Trainer tracking.
Yeah. Dan Skelton is dropped a bit as well, and Fergal O'Brien's down at 8.5%. What's going on, Fergal?
Tell us, Fergal.
Yeah. Well, we might be able to ask him ourselves in months to come.
Who knows?
Potential little spoiler there. So the last question, we're going to do a jargon bust, and we're going to try and do one each week in 3 out because there's so much jargon in racing. Bruno, you were going to tell us what a wind-up is and should punters care?
Yeah, wind-ups, very, very common procedure that racehorses have to help improve their airflow. Now, much with us humans, when we are sitting around like we are doing a podcast, we don't really need that much oxygen to function. But when we're out there smashing a 10K out, we need quite a bit more. Same with racehorses. Now, the common issue that comes up with racehorses is that they quite often have their airflow or passages blocked during racing. And it's a very, very common thing. And there are actually 5 different types of wind-up procedures. I'm not going to go through all of them because I don't really understand them. And I don't need to. But what punters shouldn't be is worried about a horse that's just had a wind-up. If anything, there's a school of thought that horses improve having had the wind-up because they can breathe better when they're racing. There's even a school of thought that suggests that you should watch out for a W1 or a W2 next to a horse's name on a race card because it means they're going to see some significant improvement. Now, I was looking into this because it's something I've looked out for before, and we often have a bit of a joke when we see a horse on a W2, which means their second run after a wind-up, which means they're truly breathing really well because they've tested out the new throat and it works well, and now they're really confident with it. And so I had a quick look into this to see if there's any kind of statistics to suggest that horses really do come on for having one. there's not a huge amount out there, to be honest. I don't think that's a study that's been done to the nth degree. No one's got their thesis on that yet. Well, maybe they should. But
all
just
university students out there, something to think about.
Yeah, but I certainly wouldn't be put off a horse that's had a wind up. But equally, I wouldn't go looking for one to back purely on that basis. I think it's just nice to know, and it's something that's now enforced actually since 2018. Is that trainers have to declare when their horses have had wind surgery, and obviously it appears on a race card as well. So there you go, a jargon bust for the week.
Thank you very much. And I'll just add the W2 thing is interesting because actually no, I think you've basically mentioned that, so I don't need to. I wasn't even listening to what you were saying, and I've just remembered you said it. So ignore anything I was about to say. But yes, it would be very interesting to see some statistics on that. And I wonder whether they do exist somewhere. But it's certainly something that sort of come into these things come into folklore a little bit, don't they? And it's hard to know how much weight to put behind all of these things. But yeah, very interesting. Good man. Thank you for that. Right. So that brings us to the end of episode 6. Anything else that you wanted to quickly mention before we sign off, or all good?
Not really. We're just entering that phase now, aren't we? 2.5 weeks out from the big one. And yeah, starting to get pangs.
Yeah, it's bloody exciting. We're going to be, we're meeting up Tuesday evening. I'll be at the festival on the Tuesday. You're joining Tuesday evening, and then Wednesday, Thursday, guns blazing at the track, and then Saturday, Friday rather, we're watching it in a slightly more tame environment as we try and sort of ease ourselves back into reality.
Yeah, I think we've realised that works for us at our sort of stage of life, rather than trying to go for the 4-dayer and follow it up with some Six Nations or something. It's just, I haven't got it. I haven't got the stamina for it.
It's just not sustainable. Good man. Excellent. Bruno, thank you as always for your company. And thank you everybody for listening and or watching. Remember, you can access the pod through all your favourite podcast platforms. We've added it to Amazon Podcast this week, so you can get it from there too, along with Spotify, Apple and Google. Please follow the pod on those platforms, and if you'd be so kind as to leave us a rating or even a nice little review if you've enjoyed it, that would be very kind indeed. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel for video versions. Also, make sure to follow Talking Horses Podcast, all one word, on Instagram for news about the pod and plenty else from around the racing world. And lastly, do please leave us any questions on any of those platforms if you have something you'd like us to tackle on next week's show, or indeed if you have any answers to some of the things that we've either raised or got wrong in this or previous episodes. Enjoy the racing this weekend. Come on, Anne Sam. Come on, Night Salute. Gamble responsibly, of course, and we will see you all next week.
See you next week.